In this section, we will understand how to assess the candidate. If possible, try to arrange a time immediately following the interview to code the data while it's still fresh in your mind. You also may want to record your observation of the candidate's behaviors and reactions to your questions during the interview. Remember to be careful to remain objective in your observation. Rate the candidate on each competency and note your ratings on the summary page at the back of your behavior-based interview guide. Refer to the competency stages and alternatively in the Core Competency Dictionary. If you see what you perceive to be a negative example of a competency, make a note of it to flag as a concern. A negative example is like a contraindication of the competency. What's most important, however, is that it be evaluated in perspective of all other responses. This is where intent comes into play. If you get a negative example, it is important to probe for intent. For example, what prompted you to take that action, or what was your thinking in doing that? Be careful not to allow one negative example to overshadow the data as a whole. If there are no positive examples of the competency and only one negative example, then assign a 0 to the competency. Make note of any strength areas for development and your recommendations. Review all other data, including the candidate's work experience, education, training, certifications, or designations. Make sure it is appropriate. Consider how this person would fit with the job, department, and organization. Do not compare thoughts about a candidate with other interviewers until after everyone has completed their evaluation. Review your notes from the mock interviews that you did in Part 2. Code the data using the appropriate competency growth stages in the Core Competency Dictionary. Share your coding results with your practice partner. Discuss your experience and invite their feedback about where you experience areas of difficulty, how you could do things differently, and what questions you have. Ultimately, you'll be able to see how a candidate matches up to the different stages of the competency for effective performance in the role for which you are interviewing. This will enable you to see where their strengths are and what are some areas for development. And now we will explore how to make a selection decision and also understand how to conduct reference checks. Make a selection decision should be done with all other interviewers who were involved in the process. The key steps in this stage are to, first, review one candidate at a time, looking at the competency rating you have assigned and review the behavioral evidence to support the rating. Rate their level according to the growth stages of the competency. 2. Consider all other data you have about the candidate, including any assessments or tests the candidate completed, their resume, etc. For example, job fit and the candidate's career aspirations. The candidate's key strengths as they relate to the role and any gaps or opportunities for development. If there is a gap in a particular area, consider how critical the gap is to success in the role and how much effort would be required to close the gap. Consider if this is something that can be developed within a reasonable period of time. Any risks associated with hiring the candidate for the role and any strategies to mitigate these risks, such as training that might be required post-hire. If there are multiple interviewers, discuss and come to an agreement on your assessment of the candidates. Make a hiring recommendation. Conduct reference checks and any other required checks. It is recommended that only after all checks have been completed should you make an offer to the candidate. When making a selection decision, make sure you resist the impulse to automatically weed out candidates immediately after the interview. Keep an open mind. Do not make any decisions until all candidates have been interviewed and evaluated. Also remember to be objective. Ensure your selection decision is only based on job-related factors. Evaluate all candidates interviewed, Proper evaluation will ensure you made a fair assessment and select the most suitable person for the job. Compare the candidate's skills, knowledge, and behaviors to the selection criteria, not the other candidates. Document your decision and rationale to ensure it's legally defensible. Be cautious of any biases and do not allow them to affect your decision. It is illegal to allow biases toward any of the prohibited grounds under the Ontario Human Rights Code affect your selection decision. Remember, it is not necessary for the candidate to prove that you intended to discriminate, only that your action had to the effect of discrimination. Your role in the hiring process is to make a sound decision based on the objective data you have gathered. Checking references is a vital link in the selection process. In addition to verifying such things such as work history, previous reliability and attendance, confirmed degrees, certificates, and licenses, and verified competency strengths. Reference checks are conducted to validate a candidate's job performance. It is important to make sure that references are current and that you maintain confidentiality. Ideally, you need to speak with the most recent manager or supervisor of the candidate. You want to avoid checking references with friends or family. Here are some other items to consider. Confirm any details provided by the candidate. Ask questions pertaining to the competencies and other relevant areas. When asking questions about competencies, ask the reference to provide you with behavioral examples. Be aware of any biases of the person providing the reference. Listen for any contradictions in the information given. Take sufficient notes. Following the reference check, summarize information and compare it to the interview data. It is important to get specific behavioral data. Remember to keep reference checks information confidential along with any other checks. We talked about the value of behavior-based interview versus traditional interviews. Behavior-based interviews are based on the premise that past performance predicts future performance. Ensure you have a clear understanding of the competencies you will be exploring with job candidates. This is critical to conducting effective behavioral-based interviews. When conducting behavior-based interviews, focus on the key elements: situation, task, actions, and results. Thank you for participating in the behavioral-based interviewing process training. We encourage you to apply your learning at every opportunity and continue to practice this skill.